Okay.
We're getting there.
Yeah, it says
Facebook
it's
is
streaming.
okay. I think we are live on Facebook now,
Yeah.
and I will turn on record, and I will admit everyone from the waiting room, and I will open the waiting room. Okay, we are good to go. Hello, everybody. People are joining. Welcome, welcome. It's nice by now to see familiar faces. Okay, Claudia, it's yours.
So welcome everyone to the final session of our IASC webinar series, What is Spiritual Care from the Perspectives of Our Different Professions. It's great to meet again in the Zoom room. It's so good to see that we are part of a bigger network, and many of you have participated in several sessions over the last few weeks. Thanks for all your reflections, questions you brought in that further clarify essentials of spiritual care. Our session today will be recorded and we are again live on Facebook, so welcome to the greater audience. My name is Claudia Kohli-Reichenbach, and I'm very excited that in this webinar series or in this webinar session, our other IASC board members will be our panelists today, together with our colleague Kei Okada. Today, our focus is on pastoral care, a term that is not undisputed. So let me say our focus today is on Seelsorge. And our experts today are the Reverend Dr. Pamela Cooper-White. She's Dean and Vice President for Academic Affairs and Professor of Psychology and Religion at Union Theological Seminary in New York. Pamela Cooper-White has published 9 books, including Old and Dirty Gods, Religion, Anti-Semitism and the Origins of Psychoanalysis, or, to mention another one, Shared Wisdom, Use of the Self in Pastoral Care and Counseling. Pam is the president of the IASC and serves on the steering committee of the Psychology, Culture and Religion Program Unit of the American Academy of Religion, as well as several editorial reviewing panels. Pamela Cooper-White is an Episcopal priest, licensed and board-certified clinical counselor and pastoral psychotherapist. Our second panelist is the Reverend Emmanuel Y. Larte. Emmanuel Larte is Professor of Pastoral Theology and Spiritual Care at Candler School of Theology in Atlanta. An internationally acclaimed scholar, Emmanuel Lartey is recognized as a pioneer in the development of an intercultural approach to pastoral care and counseling, which argues for and models respectful engagement across racial, gender, class, cultural, and religious boundaries. Emmanuel Lartey is the author of 5 books, including In Living Color, An Intercultural Approach to Pastoral Care and Counseling, and most recently, Postcolonial Images of Spiritual Care, Challenges of Care in a Neoliberal Age. Emmanuel is a founding board member of the IASC. And our third panelist today is the Reverend Kay Okada. Kay Okada is the program manager of end-of-life spiritual care at Visiting Nurse Service of New York, Hospice and Palliative Care. Kay Okada is an ordained minister of American Baptist Churches and a board-certified chaplain. A Christian mystic and a visual artist, born in New York and raised in Japan, Kay spent 8 years in visual and performing arts before studying at Union Theological Seminary and starting to pursue chaplaincy 28 years ago. His focus in recent lectures and writings in US and Japan has been on creative integration of intersensory and interpersonal end-of-life consciousness and semantics in spiritual care. Thank you so much for being with us today. The schedule for today will be the same again as in the last 4 webinars. Without interruption, we'll hear our 3 panelists. Afterwards, we will go into breakout rooms for discussion in small groups. And then about 20 minutes later, the groups will end automatically and you will be brought back to the plenary for questions and discussion. So what is spiritual care from the perspective of Seelsorge? Pamela Cooper-White.
Can you all see my screen share? Okay, great. So today, I want to begin by naming the context of my presentation. For today's presentation, I want to share an overview of what's been happening in the discipline of pastoral care as it's been taught in mainline, which means mostly liberal Protestant Christian seminaries, in the United States in the past couple of decades, and the shifts that have taken place from the founding of the field in the 1950s and 60s. To our American participants today, a lot of what I'm going to say may sound familiar, but still in many contexts in the United States, especially in evangelical and some Catholic seminaries, many of these shifts and developments are still absent or still beginning just now to happen. So the word pastoral comes, of course, from the Latin pastor, which means shepherd. And this has been the traditional Christian metaphor, the pastoral caregiver as the shepherd. So the shepherd tends the flock, feeds and guides the sheep, steers them in the direction they are to go, and protects them from wolves and marauders. And drawing on Christ's own words, the shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, the Gospel of John. This was taken seriously by generations of pastoral caregivers who felt the call to sacrificial love of their flock and the task of moral and spiritual guidance. But this image, as Claudia already referenced in her introduction, has numerous problems. It can lead to viewing one's own pastoral ministry as so uniquely indispensable that one's own needs as caregiver can be neglected indefinitely. And if the pastoral caregiver or his or her family should suffer for this, it's all within the framework of the self-sacrificial love of the shepherd. Also, the truth is, who in any congregation or community wants to be thought of simply as a sheep without agency or self-determination? So over the past 2 decades, this shepherd paradigm has been challenged in large part due to the influence of 2 very important and interrelated changes, at least in the Protestant Church: the growing presence of women in both lay and ordained leadership, and the emergence of post-colonial voices in theology around the globe, and at least in some growth in diversity of racial and class leadership in mainline Protestant churches, and heightened social power of the Black church in the United States since the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Through both the feminist and civil rights movement and liberation theologies, we've seen an increasing awareness of the limitations of traditional individualistic and white patriarchal model of care, and a widening horizon of pastoral theology and care. And so this widening may be seen in at least 3 areas that I'll focus on today. One is a return to ministry of presence from a more kind of psychiatric model. The second is attention to context, and the third is the importance of diversity. First, ministry of presence. Pastoral care has had to keep learning that just listening is truly facilitative. There was a swing in the 1960s, and I would even say throughout the 1980s when I was training, toward a clinical model, when I would note the social status and professional authority of the clergy was waning in American society, while the medical profession, including psychiatry, was still highly regarded. So pastors tended to want to think of themselves as a kind of psychotherapist, and theological reflection was done merely as a kind of add-on to elaborate on clinical case formulations. Emmanuel and Kay, you probably remember training and how theological reflection was given short shrift in favor of clinical case formulations. Pastoral theologians in the 1990s began to reclaim the distinctive spiritual and theological character of our discipline, as chaplains and religious leaders are uniquely trained to provide care that emphasizes the spiritual needs of persons. Now, what I'm about to say is actually controversial in some circles now, but I still believe that chaplaincy and spiritual care is a form of ministry and not merely an adjunct medical profession. Training in our respective religious traditions grounds our provision of care, from which we then can and should partner with other helping professions. A second important trend is the turn toward social, economic, political, and cultural context. Traditional one-on-one models of pastoral care based on the medical model tended to operate in the arena of the individual psyche, and perhaps on the family system. But the individual and nuclear family model, while still helpful to many in our care today, nevertheless ignored the larger dimensions of human experience. And this chart from the Multicultural Family Institute, including the social, political, economic, racial, ethnic, and cultural surround in which any individuals, represented here by these 3 circles, the immediate family, the extended family, and then friends and community and the larger society, this is what began to be attended to that had been ignored in a more medical model or psychiatric model. And notice that there are all these stressors, enduring what they call vertical stressors, that are always present and pushing on people's capacity to cope, and horizontal stressors, which are stressors that happen across time. All of these things now have come to be recognized as important aspects of our attention to care, both acute and ongoing. The increasing awareness of these contextual realities led pastoral theology into a greater social systems perspective, expanding the scope of pastoral care to encompass the work for justice. As Larry Kent Graham advocated, a shift from relational humanness to relational justice. My dear colleague and co-panelist Emmanuel Larte has made further very important contributions in this area with his writings on the resources of non-Western modes of care, which are often much more communal, and how we need to bring a post-colonial, or I would even say anti-colonial, and intercultural lens to the way we conceptualize our field. This, in turn, has meant that the arena for care has broadened toward doing public theology, that is, getting out into the public arena as activists as well as personal caregivers to address the underlying social causes of suffering and to join in coalition with other advocates for social change. The commitment to relational justice evolved hand in hand with the third aspect of change in pastoral care, which is diversity. Slowly but surely in America, we have seen growing racial, ethnic, gender, and interreligious diversity of scholars and practitioners, although much more is hopefully yet to come. Interreligious engagement brought a critique in particular of the term pastoral care itself. That Bible, the shepherd as a model for pastoral caregivers has carried a distinctively Christian history and character. In a modern, globalized, and religiously plural world, however, Christian-based pastoral care is not enough. For this reason, many hospitals, prisons, and other contexts for care have shifted to the more non-sectarian term, spiritual care. Spiritual care might well be served by Paul Tillich's old definition from the founding days of pastoral care as a profession, a, quote, helping encounter in the dimension of ultimate concern. What is the appropriate role of a chaplain trained in one particular faith tradition in response to those of another faith? At the very first conference of the IASC in Bern, Switzerland, we probed this question from an interreligious perspective and came to an understanding that pastoral care is probably best understood as a subspecialty within spiritual care. And I found this very helpful chart from an Australian context in which we see embedded chaplains and faith representatives, and then spiritual care practitioners as a larger circle, and then all healthcare providers, as we've heard earlier in our webinar series, who also need to tend to the holistic spiritual care of all patients. The important skills of listening, compassionate presence, and advocacy for those in our care cut across all religious boundaries, but sacramental or ritual care and questions of theology, doctrine, and tradition require the caregivers of the same tradition as the helpee. Chaplains should refrain from performing liturgies or giving dogmatic instruction to a person of another faith. And it should go without saying, never ever to proselytize for their own religious beliefs. Finally, I will just mention a few of the most recent ways in which our field has, from its heightened awareness of context, attended to political realities and identities, particularly the captivity of all our institutions and practices to the sweeping reality of neoliberalism, Western imperialism, and racism. How have Western models of care been captive to capitalist commodification of care? And how have the spiritualities of Black, Brown, and Indigenous peoples been disregarded or devalued historically in our fields of pastoral theology, care, and counseling? And responding with growing awareness to the concerns of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and today especially non-binary and transgender individuals, and the ways in which our field, especially influenced by psychiatry, has done harm in the past. All these concerns have generated a rich and growing literature on spiritual care and advocacy from unique identity perspectives. And these book covers are just a few of the recent publications that are addressing some of these issues. For example, immigrant groups in the U.S., differing racial identities, LGBT and queer communities and post-colonial perspectives. There's been a new growth in our literature also from non-Christian religious perspectives, especially Jewish and Buddhist and some Muslim perspectives. Now, to make one last comment from my own area of research as a psychoanalytically trained pastoral psychotherapist and theologian, and Emmanuel will know that I bang this drum rather often, I have continued to encourage our field not to lose the insights of our earlier attention to the ways in which the unconscious influences us as individuals and in groups. The School of Relational Psychoanalysis, in particular, over against the rigid authoritarian model of so-called classical psychoanalysis in the 50s and 60s, offers us a new richness in its understanding of intersubjectivity and unconscious relationship. As a field, we rejected the old ego psychology mode of rigid psychoanalysis, rightly, I think, in the 60s and 70s, in favor of family systems and Rogerian person-centered models of counseling. But relational psychoanalysis is now, finally, addressing systemic racism and gender inequality within the institutions of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, and within our own psyches, our countertransference, as including our own deeply ingrained racial and gender bias. So I will close by saying that psychoanalysis, too, is a partner with whom we should continue to collaborate without abandoning any of the ethical and moral strides our field has taken and is taking, both in the U.S. and internationally, in providing spiritual care today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pamela Cooper-White. And I will pass the virtual microphone to Emmanuel Larty.
Thank you very much for that encyclopedic and panoramic exploration of our pastoral care perspectives. That was has helpfully set the frame, which I will hope to intensify by focusing particularly on post-colonial views that have been mentioned. And the first thing I want to speak from the perspective of pastoral theology as one of the disciplines of practical theology that we work from as persons in the, if you like, our professional guild is theological, and our practices emanates from this particular field of theology. So I begin and always seek to do so from theological anthropology. In other words, beginning from how we understand human persons. And I think that our work as pastoral theologians in spiritual care emanates from our understanding of persons, the way in which we see persons. And we have this notion from Christian theological sources that all human beings are created in the image of God. And so there is that which is spiritual, that is a feature of every human person. So we very quickly recognize that rather than the preserve of some special people defined as religious or defined as having certain faith perspectives, we understand spirituality to refer to something much more widespread, something that is a human capacity. And what you are seeing is one way in which I have sought to understand spirituality. For we are thinking about how pastoral theologians, how practical theologians approach spiritual care. Well, we understand spirituality largely to be a human capacity, a capacity that is shared by all human beings. And in questing into that, what that is, many have come to the realization that it lies very much in our capacity for relationship. And so I speak of it as our capacity for relationship with self, with others, with God, or with that which we understand as transcending sensory experience, which is often expressed in specific activities and forms of action that exist or that happen in historical, spatial, and social contexts in the world. So spirituality is a human capacity, and it is located in our capacity or ability to relate. And so speak about it in 5 dimensions: relationship with self, relationship with transcendence, relationship with others, relationship within groups, and relationship in environment or environmental terms. And so in exploring spiritual care, what we seek to do, or how we seek to understand it, is that it helps us, spiritual care in whatever shape or form it comes, helps us to maintain a balance. Spiritual practices help us to develop a healthy balance between different aspects of our lives. And increasingly recognized is how reductionism or narrowness of any type actually results in toxicity. It actually results in the capacity to do harm, which is what we want to avoid. And so this notion of balance, this notion of health, is absolutely crucial to our understanding of spiritual care from a theological perspective. So first, a few words about relationship with self, and picking up that notion, the psychological notions that our previous presenter, colleague Pamela Cooper-White, has been speaking about. I lift up this particular quotation from Urgings of the Heart, written by a spiritual director and a Jungian therapist. Neither a spirituality that ignores the dynamics of psychological growth, nor a psychology that denies the spiritual nature of human persons can serve as an adequate guide today for people who seek to live with greater harmony and integration. And this is what it is. We are seeking ways, and all people, all of us are seeking ways to live with greater harmony and with greater integration within. So spiritual care then we see as exploring relationship with self. So you'll find a lot of attention being paid to notions of self-awareness, notions of self-esteem, the challenges and dangers of self-absorption, various ways of thinking of self-realization, self-appropriation, and also self-transcendence. These are simply some of the terms that when we explore that relationship with self that we call a dimension of spirituality. These are the kinds of things that we look at, among others. The second dimension is relationship with transcendence. And I come to this from a theological perspective, in which what theologians do is to critique religious language and to critically explore what is implied within particular formulations of transcendence. And so as I think about relationship with transcendence, I recognize that transcendence is understood, experienced, and spoken of in many, many different ways. But also it is important, I think, especially for those of us who come from a theological background, to recognize that religious language is not the only means available to articulate that experience. And so it is necessary for us to, I think, explore, when we do explore people's understandings and experiences of transcendence, to do so with, if we are inspired by theological thinking, to do so with this critical openness to alternative and different ways of speaking about this, this whatever transcendence means to different people. And I would offer that that kind of exploration actually enhances or promotes the care of persons. The other dimension, the third dimension, is relationship with an other. As spiritual care accounts for or reviews or explores those dyadic relational dynamics that are typical for us, examining how they can promote or hinder health and wholeness. And I particularly chose this particular illustration to get us out of our anthropocentric mindset, but also to draw attention to great differences that can actually be promote relationships in ways that we sometimes may not be aware of. A fourth dimension to this is relationships among people, and a term I coined, communiopathy, that speaks about empathy as a group experience. And I think about the need for and the importance of systemic and structural approaches to our spiritual care that are able to gauge the health promoting as well as the death dealing ways in which groups operate. This is an important dimension of our perception and our practice of spiritual care. And finally, the fifth area is how spirituality is connected with the material culture, with space, with nature, with place, how land, rivers, mountains, trees, as well as works of creative arts and the built environment, we enter into any discussion or any conversations around what spiritual care and what spirituality might look like. So sometimes our spiritual care may have to do with just exploring the space that people occupy and how that can be health destroying as well as how it can be health promoting. And so these dimensions, and in bringing my comments to a close, these dimensions are the dimensions along which we explore and understand and practice spiritual care in the light of our particular faith perspectives. So I want to end by speaking about some of the impulses towards spiritual care that arise from post-colonial theological and existential realities. The first of four is that there is an impulse within post-colonial thought and post-colonial experience to call into question dominance and hegemony of all types and all kinds of human relationships that are subject to dominance and hegemony. And so all top-down, all hierarchical, all patriarchal, all paternalistic forms of human relationship come under a serious question. And that was even evident already in the analysis of the challenges of the term pastoral care and the desire to kind of move into something which is less top-down, less hierarchical, less patriarchal, and less paternalistic. A second impulse is that of celebrating plurality, and this has been mentioned already. In this sense, that spiritual care comes in many and varied forms. And so a realization of plurality and a celebration of plurality becomes imperative. The fourth is the polyfocality. It's not only that different forms exist, but they must be encouraged. Many voices need to be encouraged. And it is in the creativity, in the courageous activity of exploring the different ways in which people are seeking their wholeness and their health that we contribute to the discipline of spiritual care. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so very much, Emmanuel. Some people ask if they can have the slides. Actually, you will find the whole session recorded on Facebook and on our website, so you can see the slides again. Also, Kei Okada, our next panelist, he will refer to some homepages and he will put the links into the chat afterwards. So you will have everything. Kei, you are our third speaker. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. You can hear me? Okay.
We your slideshow went back to your editing.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Oh.
There you go.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. I really appreciate this opportunity to present among my esteemed scholars and yes, friends. So in the limited time, I'd like to present what is spiritual care in light of COVID-19. I work for a home hospice care setting in New York City. And because time is limited, I feel myself like a chef who cannot just present the actual food on the table. The table is 15 minutes long, so I have to present to you kind of a menu, my old tools, and also the new experience because of how the pandemic is affecting our spiritual care practice. So for your food for thoughts, for the sake of your discussion, here we go. So the framework of my presentation surrounding the definition of spiritual care, the framework, and assessment documentation, what kind of language. Of course, I cannot present everything we have in our electronic charting system. Currently, my organization is using the application called Home Care Homebase. They allow us to edit the language. So in the past couple of years, and during this pandemic also, I've been editing the language. So I will show you some examples of it. And from the rest is how the pandemic is really impacting spiritual care and what kind of spiritual needs during this pandemic. And in the spiritual aspect of this pandemic, what kind of senses are awakening, and how can we possibly intentionally use the awareness to apply it to our approach in face of a lot of limitations and precautions that are enforced upon us because of the pandemic. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. Many slides, please go back to the recording later on. And also I will share quite a number of web links to those definitions, and also the competencies defined by Association of Professional Chaplains and so on. And also the discussion of dignity. I have found 2 great papers. So later, after this presentation, I will share those web links. So I'm working in the framework of hospice palliative care. And WHO, of course, used the word spiritual in the definition of palliative care. And the spiritual care, I've been presenting in Japan also. And in the Japanese language, we have different, our language has Chinese characters as part of the language. And each character has a symbolic meaning and sense to it. And the spiritual care itself is very difficult to be translated. And so the word spirit has a different sense. Maybe like a ki, the life force that's part of our greetings. Hello, genki. That's from the Shintoism background that it has. But that kind of spiritual background, the Japanese language has. And so in connection with that, the definition has been really clinicians in Japan, they are struggling to really feel connected with this spiritual care, but calming the soul. I feel kind of affinity with the German definition of Seelsorge. So I will present more. And this also, please read later. If you look up the definition of spiritual care, of course, we have tons of definitions. And when I talk to someone who is not necessarily spiritual or religious, or new patients or their families, usually one of the simplest ways to explain is the spirituality or spiritual care really addresses how your values and beliefs are affecting your well-being, because everybody has a different way of interpreting what's happening. And your interpretation may be affecting your well-being. And so we respect your belief system and support. And so these keywords you see a lot in the field of spiritual care, whole person care, holistic care. And we cover from the physical need, bio, psychosocial, spiritual care. And spiritual care, according to the National Consensus Project definition, it covers the spiritual, existential, and religious aspects of needs. And we notice spiritual care is more experiential, transformative, and inspiring. It touches on the cultural, moral, ethical, legal. A lot of things in between what's happening in the interaction between the spiritual care counselor and patients, families, and I'm going to dig more about this interpersonal awareness. What is the approach? But so we are always working in the tension between this evidence-based culture and then meeting the regulatory requirements that are part of the organizational, clinical, and medical organization. Spiritual care, as Dr. Pchowski in the first session presented, spiritual care as the clinical discipline. In the organizational context, spiritual care is in a unique tension with the evidence-based culture. So we are bridging. So this is my workplace, Visiting Nurse Service of New York. And this is a typical team makeup, and spiritual care counselor is part of this clinical team. And again, this is a home care. So we go to visit, provide medical care at our patients' homes. And our care is based on the philosophy of Dame Cicely Saunders. And as she said, you matter because you are. You matter to the last moment of life. We will do all we can, not only to help you die peacefully, but to live until you die. The key is in the living. And her philosophy of total pain, that bringing the comfort to the suffering. We have to assess the suffering. And these domains are affecting each other every moment. And the spiritual care, not necessarily separate from the other three, but because spirituality is about the meaning, about the purpose, interpretation. So spiritual pain is behind every aspect of physical, social, and psychological pain. And some patients, families, and we during this pandemic may feel like this Goya's etching sometimes. And the pain, another unique point of spiritual care is spiritual care may not assess pain as a problem to fix, but maybe spiritual care provides the space and time to attend the message. What is the message in this pain? And again, this is the definition presented by Dr. Pchowski. Again, this is one standard of clinical definition. And it has some keyword of meaning, purpose, and transcendence. And when someone loses this aspect, it becomes a spiritual pain. Another key point is disconnection. So the point might be when you see patient and family struggling, not coping well. Interesting question, existential question is, where are the disconnections? So our approach can be, what can be meaningful? Our approach, how can our approach can be meaningful? And their life, what can be meaningful, purposeful? And the meaning of transcendence, climbing over their mindset, their understanding of reality, what to expect, their sense of potential. Every bit of moment and days, there might be this transcendence, sending aspect in humanity. It's a process. And if we talk about faith, it doesn't have to be religious. Rabbi Heschel, faith is not that clinging to a shrine, but an endless pilgrimage of the heart. Or Paul Tillich, faith is the state of being ultimately concerned. And Blaise Pascal, there are three sources of belief: reason, custom, inspiration. So those sources of belief and faith, what can be their grounding place? That's what it's important for spiritual care. And social workers have to meet with the new patients within the 5 days of the admission. And they do have this initial visit template, including spiritual assessment. And I had to edit their language recently. So currently, this is the finished current status of what kind of language we're using. So social workers go there. This is the initial visit of hospice patients. And the first question is, what are the sources of meaning for patients and families? Personal or spiritual, religious or cultural? And then assess the strength, coping mechanism, and their concerns or sources of distress. So the strength can be very varied. Some are religious, others are existential, relational, and also the spiritual needs. Some needs happen when there are relational disconnections. and they feel isolated, separation, loneliness, sense of guilt, need of forgiveness, reconciliation. It's a big theme for spiritual care. And spiritual care attends a moral, ethical dilemma related to one's role and identity, the really changing according to the person's disease progression, or in a way we are living right now in the world's, in a way, hospice experience in face of uncertainties. This is sort of a Christian sort of a biblical words, these faith, hope, and love. But the simple questions breaking down is, what is reliable and certain in face of uncertainties? And what is the ultimate concern? What is not ending when some other things, including our mortality, our physical presence, will end one day? So this relational aspect we bring. Now, this is New York City. We are in an extremely dangerous situation. And my organization, Visiting Nurse Service of New York, covers the entire area. And pastoral care in light of COVID-19, this is a wilderness experience, so much uncertainty, and we are facing mortality and isolation, lack of contact, lack of connection. And this, in the field of chaplaincy, moral distress and moral injury among the caregivers and clinicians, this is one main theme we've been discussing. And mental behavioral health, we have a language, trauma-informed care. That's a new field to be developed. And also I versus they, this is splitting the nation, and it's really creating misinformation. And in the session on public health, it was a discussion of individual versus community, but then we can think about the individual as a relationally responsible entity or beings. And then so the question is, each person has a different range of responsibilities, and who is my keeper, or to whom I can be a neighbor? That kind of question may be related to pastoral care. And our visits, because of the danger of coronavirus, a lot of things are being done, telehealth visits. And so without touching the person, without holding the person in your arms, how much we can do has been the spiritual stretching of awareness and approach. We did memorial services, morning support group. So the support groups and the services also bring the sense of solidarity going through together. And healing is truly the personal experience of the transcendence of suffering. And also Albert Einstein said no problem can be solved from the same consciousness. So we need this empathic openness and yes, critical openness to really operate on multi-consciousness and break down the consciousness. And the consciousness, again, the question, is it personal possession, individual consciousness, or collective consciousness is touching us? This spiritual question happens. So another measure is from debilitating fear to affirming love. And if somebody is suffering and not yet and no longer, supporting the grief, how can we bring the sense of already and fulfilling? And Rumi's poem was earlier quoted in the second or third session, but the wound is a place where light enters your soul, kind of sense. And so in or out, kind of in-between sense. And like this, a pink seesaw won the prize, design prize. They installed this for 20 minutes in the border between US and Mexico. So when there is a wall, we cannot touch the person. What can make the walls meaning, transform the meaning of the wall is really, so one is presence. Dame Cecily Saunders says, soul pain is reached and healed by the way routine care is carried out. So really, how do you present your presence? And in the ancient Greece, there is this understanding of we are the medicine, but they understood we are the poison and cure. So our aspect of suffering and healing that we bring, and how can we put our woundedness in the service of others, is a spiritual care question. And this interdependentness, interpersonal empathy, and being whole, this healing process, our understanding is healing from either or. And being and doing these things are integrated together in spiritual care. And the word nursing also in Japanese language, it's a combination of hand and eye. And if you see the patient through the screen, how can you do nursing? And Irene Dodd, this dancer, presented actually a very interesting sense that she sees how the human eyes formed incoming and outgoing forces together. So she presented, for instance, you look at the ground, you touch the hand, but you feel the, how can I say, incoming and outgoing forces together to really feel the breath, that sort of practice. And the time is up, so I have to cut, but this intra-sensory of how much spiritual sense we can use intentionally is really through the care and compassion, spiritual dimension of meaning. We are just exploring the meaning of these, listening to patient's story as a confession, and attending the evolving stories that may evolve beyond death, and bringing the deceased loved ones in the conversation of now, and in the wider spectrum of our relationships.
Thank you very much, Kay. I'm not sure if you lost you. Are you still here? I'm not too sure. But you will be here again. Thank you so much, Kay. We will now go into small groups. You will be invited to join a group, and we'll have about 20 minutes to discuss. You can also put questions into the chat as in the sessions before, and then after 20 minutes you will be brought back to the plenary session. Yes, and I suggest that first you take a short break for your eyes, and then you will be part of a small group. See you later.
Okay, so I'm going to do this now, and if you need a focus question, just simply think together about what really stood out to you during these presentations and what questions you'd like to bring back. So here we go. Kay is back.
I need to practice. This is a very good practice ground, just summarizing 15 minutes, because you and Lati, beautiful presentation.
Great, it was great. If you haven't yet joined a small group, you just have to click on join. So everybody please go to your groups. So presenters, if you need a break, feel free to take a break. If you are watching this on a recording, you may wish to fast forward to when you see the gallery view again with everyone coming back. I appreciated the way all three of our talks really resonated with each other. And I feel like we kind of demonstrated that there is a field here and we are thinking about things together.
Yes,
Indeed.
yes.
Still so different focuses. I really enjoyed it also in the order. I thought that was really very good, like to have like this grounds and then to go into practice at the end. Thank you so much. I really thought that was a good, I don't know how you say, not a layout, but like yeah, so, and quite some questions to discuss, I'm sure, about definitions as well, because it's so contextual, I'm sure.
Yes.
Well, and
Fascinating.
I'm curious from all of your perspectives whether you think I represented the shifts in the history accurately, or was there anything that was left out?
I really appreciated the review of the history. Yes.
Yeah, I think that this, the sweep was very, very helpful to to have in view. I mean, there are obviously little differences in different places in terms of but the sweep is, I think, was very, very, very accurate.
One question I had at about Pam about pastoral, this image of shepherd, and you being a shepherd, and then self-sacrifice, you give, and you burn out.
Right.
But I also created the separate slides. I was also reflecting on my approach from the scriptures. So I was quoting scriptures, and we do also have a sense of sort of a shepherd. The only true shepherd is God, and we, the believers or the followers, we become sort of under shepherd. And where is the pathos? And the pathos is not us, but the God. So this sort of self-achievement, self-fulfillment kind of mentality might be from somewhere else, maybe from contemporary or...
That's where I used to go with all the shepherd stuff. This came from something that was much longer and much older, and it turned out I spent all of Saturday changing it. But yeah, I used to also say we can't confuse ourselves with Christ, the shepherd of the sheep, and that's where a lot of people get in trouble.
But I think sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Emmanuel.
No, I was going to say, I think that given our the tendency to have a patriarch image as God, the problem remains. Because then it is still, the powerful bearded man, read God, who is, and then the rest of us are under shepherds, but we are under this, so I think there still is a, we don't get away from the images,
right,
that are associated with this, and it's those that are problematic.
But actually the power also, according to some scriptures, like Jesus' own words, I was interested in this, and also St. Francis Assisi's prayer, this power to lay down, not as a loss of strength, but power to lay down and power to pick up, take back. Like it's that power is not really like a dominating power. So I'm interested in that divine power.
Well, of course, feminist theologians have been talking about this for a long time, and the paradox of strength and vulnerability, and more communal modes of authority and authority sharing. But I also, going back to Stuart Hiltner, I think this book was written in 1964, or something like that. I mean,
Mhm.
generations of pastoral theologians were trained in Seward Hiltner's model of the pastor as the shepherd. And so it was just at the founding of our field, it was ingrained as a definition of the field. And he even wanted to use, it never caught on, but in seminaries he wanted to use the term poimenics as a parallel to homiletics, which meant shepherding in Greek. So we've got a lot of work to do, especially I think in the North American context, where even people who aren't Christian are still, we're marinated in Christian supremacy here in this country.
Ay, ay, ay.
Mhm.
How do we loosen the grip
Mhm.
on that?
Mhm. I see.
Yes.
Yes, the new book, I know.
And I think we
Put
have
that
to
in the
be.
chat, Emmanuel. You should put that title in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, and that reminds me, Kay, you were going to put your links in the chat while we're on break here.
And actually from the text I copy,
Yep.
and then the chat says to everyone, and I
Yep.
paste.
Yep.
It doesn't paste. Why?
Um,
And I can write, but then I can write words.
Try if you copied, try, are you on a PC or a Mac?
Mac.
No, I can't help you. Gonna say try Control V. Yeah, you should be able to click in the chat, so your cursor is in the chat, and then you should be able to paste.
Or you can send it by email. You can send them to me and I will put them in the chat.
Excellent.
Yep,
Excellent.
try.
That's another way. Yeah. Thank you, Claudia.
Let's try.
Yeah, let's try. I have also mystical words. I couldn't reach that slide. So.
The last one, like there are still a lot of slides you couldn't show?
No, just a few, but ending with these very mystical language. So I'm going to copy that too.
Great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Check.
You remember, Pam, Dr. Bossis presented a couple of years. Yeah. And his quotes were really mystical.
Huh.
Yeah.
I haven't been in touch with him since COVID. There was going to be a whole conference in Greece around the psilocybin research, and it all disappeared because of COVID. That conference. So I haven't been in touch with him for quite a while. I wonder how he's doing.
Yeah, because one hospice patient said, there is no death. Everything is a change. Isn't it wonderful?
That was one of the people in the, not in his research with people who were afraid of dying, who had cancer. Yeah. And how a micro dose of LSD apparently just really, really helped all the people in the study. It's interesting research.
I'm interested in taking that substance.
Remember, we're recording now, Kay.
Did you send it?
Out there.
I'm going to. And also the mystical word that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings.
Spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes, I agree.
Right.
Okay, Claudia.
Did you send me the email?
Yeah, it's here. Okay, right here.
There was a question that came up in the chat for you, Kay, which was, why was the social worker doing that for spiritual assessment and not you?
We do in-depth spiritual assessment. That's a spiritual screening, information gathering. So it's an initial stage. I forgot to say that. Yeah, spiritual care follows in-depth assessment, but this is initial information gathering.
Does anybody in hospice ever refuse to interact with the chaplain?
Yes, and but I forgot to say that during the pandemic, less people say no. more people are open to process more deeply. And that's interesting.
That's very interesting,
Yeah. Claudia, will you also share the mystical words, the three people?
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll do it in a...
You know what you were saying a little bit ago, Emmanuel, about the patriarchal God with the beard and the everything. And I think one of the shifts I've experienced personally through COVID, I mean, it was coming anyway, but it just put the last nail in the coffin for me of any sort of anthropomorphic God. Because I think any God person, you know, the whole theodicy question of how could any kind of personal person God allow this to happen? And it's not like there haven't been other terrible, terrible atrocities that always raise that question. But living in the middle of all this death, ongoing, I can't see having a person God, you know, but I still want to embrace the idea of a God as the power of love, or the power of healing and renewal and creativity and all of those things. I think is a lot of what you were pointing to too in your presentation, Kay, that it's not like I'm an atheist, but it's just that I became so conscious of how much our language in our liturgies and in our songs and hymns and everything, it's all, even if it's not God, He, but it's all
personal.
God's hand, God's mind, you know. God's not a person. He's not, he is not one of us in the same way that we are. And
for me, God is personal, but it's not individual. I think it's the relationship is God, and the mystery is what is this suffering, pain and suffering. That's the mystery.
The personal does not have to be in a person, you know, in a you know, there's a sort of relational, personal kind of quality to
and
transcendence.
That's my understanding of Trinity also. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and together.
The relationality, amen.
And also the word, Hebrew word Adam, right? Adam, that's like a sheep or fish, or it's a collective noun, so it's plural. It's not just one person, Adam, but it's
as is Elohim.
Yes,
Elohim is a plural, you know. So.
And I think we have to make it clear in our language. And I think what Pam said, I mean, the liturgies are full of images of like personal in a narrow sense. And that's why I think spiritual care, Seelsorge, makes such an important contribution to theology in some. And I think it's a big challenge actually to find adequate language.
I
mean, sometimes it sounds so psycho spiritual and so soft, but I think it's so important to somehow that's really an important contribution. I'm so convinced to the whole field of theology.
Well, and a lot of the insistence on Father God language to me is a failure of metaphorical thinking. And there is a sort of developmental aspect to that, you know, cognitively even, that I don't think Father was ever intended to be the first name of a person who is God. You know, it's a one metaphor among many.
Right.
You know, how long ago did Sally McFaig write about metaphors? But people seem so stuck on the concrete. And then we have the pastoral challenges with some people of not wanting to take away the props that they have. And if they believe in a loving Father God, we don't want to just say, nope, can't go there, can't do that. So.
Yeah, I learned at the Union, like a book of Hosea, chapter 11, the very maternal image of divinity. This, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you, my notions of being atheist, yeah, I often want to use, the historic view of myself as a Christian atheist, in the sense that there are some gods that I do not believe in. I do not believe in the God who inspires people to storm the Capitol with symbols of faith.
Yeah.
And then to go into the place, threatening to kill, maim, and destroy.
Yeah.
And then to invoke the name of Jesus in a fervent prayer.
Yeah.
In the place where such horror is being done. I do not believe in that God. But people do, people who are my co-religionists believe in that God. So in relation to that God, call me an atheist any day. I will embrace atheism any day. If this is God, I don't believe in that. Yeah. So I feel very much, it's very, very important for us to be able to challenge. And that's part of what I was saying when I said religious language. It is our role as theologians, pastors, leaders. We have to critique and challenge the religious language that inspires so much of what is really, really destructive.
I couldn't agree with you more. And some of those images, like the big, giant 8-foot cross that's swinging around, and together with the Confederate flag and the noose, and one of the I've found very helpful since I've been at Union is that we have my colleague John Tatamanel actually teaches a course on multiple religious belonging, and he came out with a book, Circling the Elephant, that talks about that, and among other things. And many people don't anymore just subscribe or believe in the belief systems of one religious tradition.
Right.
But there's not a lot of space within religious institutions to claim that kind of multiplicity.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we really open up the walls?
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say there's not, I think it's important to be grounded in the history of your tradition that you grew up in, but I also think we have to recognize that people have very plural understandings of their own belonging. And also your work, Emmanuel, I mean, just all the work around indigenous and African religious traditions, and how, syncretism isn't a bad word. Christian theologians don't like that word, but
they do it all the same.
Yeah, but it's what people do.
They do it. Even those who are opposed to it do it all the time.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, anybody who has a Christmas tree is doing it.
Right. Right.
Emmanuel, that's something that Walter Hollenweger always said. He taught the class on that.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to bring the groups back. They'll have a 60-minute warning. I mean, 60-second warning.
Right.
And Claudia, I have sent you 3 more.
3 more. Okay, I'll check.
Another email.
Okay.
I love that Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's quote. I really love that. I used it a lot.
I love the Rumi also.
Yes. Thank you, Claudia.
Pam, I wonder if people can see them if they are still in the groups. Can they see the whole chat?
It will come.
When
It's
they,
coming now.
yeah.
It takes 60 seconds. All right, I think we're all back.
Yes, so welcome back to the plenary session. Whoever wants to start and bring in some reflections or questions directly to our panelists or just for the group, feel free to start. You can raise your hand or just jump in. I think we can see each other. Any reflections are welcome at this point.
There was the question for Kai about why the social worker does the assessment.
Yes, so I answered in the chat. It's just the initial screening we call, yeah, and then followed by spiritual care counselors, in-depth counseling and assessment. So we separate, we have three language, screening and spiritual history and spiritual assessment. And so in the most formal sense, the first two can be done by nurses or social workers, but then the last, the spiritual assessment, should be done by spiritual care counselors and ideally by both certified chaplains. Thank you.
Hi, this is Edward Peña. I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit of their training in terms of, and we can focus on the social worker or any other provider, but the training involved for them to be able and competent to conduct that type of assessment, being that they are not spiritual caregivers or specialists in the field, right? But they are doing this work, and how were they trained?
Okay, I think that's for you.
Oh, Edward, will you summarize again the question, the training?
Training of the social workers.
To conduct, the training of the social workers that to conduct this specific assessment of spirituality, right? The spiritual assessment, it's a big ask into another field that do not necessarily specialize as in spiritual caregiving. And so my wondering or curiosity is about how does that training look like for them in your context, right?
So the most difficult aspect for the social worker is when they try to introduce the whole the whole team approach, because many of the hospice patients, when their loved one or himself or herself admitted to hospice care, in the beginning, many of the people don't know what kind of service we deliver. So nurses or social workers, when they introduce the team support, including spiritual care, when they use the word spiritual care, a lot of people associate that word spiritual with religious. So without introducing spiritual care, how can we properly, openly present the team support to the new patients? And that's the more difficult part, because spiritual screening part is just information gathering. As I showed you the slide, the initial question can be very simple. Where do you find the strength? Where is the source of meaning for your life or in face of this situation? And then they may say personal, cultural, or religious, or spiritual. And the challenge is each person has a different language. Each person is like an ocean of background. They have a lived experience. So working as a spiritual care counselor, including the training of social workers and nurses, is really like becoming polyglot. really how to listen to each person's different language and calibrating and tuning into the person's language, and then so that the person can feel safe and more open to converse. And that immediate intuitive translation process, that's really, maybe if I create a training, that can be the center of our training. And by the way, this year, one homework I have is to strengthen the collaboration between social workers and spiritual care counselors. But in terms of spiritual screening, they don't have training. They just go there and ask these simplest questions to get some information. And then spiritual care counselor pick up from there and then do in-depth counseling. Yeah.
We have some interesting remarks in the chat. I would actually like to give the word to Jane.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Gosh, now I'm trying to remember what it was I asked. So I'm struck with this concept of expertise and being seen as the expert in a field, and putting that together with the understanding, limited though it may be, that I have of decolonizing practice. So it seems to me that there is a danger that we look at expertise as something to be attained, and not a never-ending process of learning that requires perhaps a delicate balance of self-esteem and humility. And I wonder what you think.
So I would very much go along with that way of thinking of expertise. I think that the challenge and the problem is the fact that we make it into a noun and we say an expert. You see, and when that happens, both the expert and those who look on the one as an expert can become entirely colonial, entirely, domineering and overpowering. You see, so I tend more towards the verb, the expertise. That this is a thing that one has expertise in, which is an ongoing process. One never becomes an expert.
Well, and playing
in the
off
sense of having,
Emmanuel,
power over, right?
playing off of what Emmanuel just said, I suppose the root of the word is the same as experience.
Right.
And my train of thought went to Aristotle, actually, and there's different kinds of knowledge, right? There's techne, which is skills, but then there's phronesis, which is more like wisdom from experience. And I think the way we do education and supervision in all of these fields that we're in can really be distorted if it stays in the realm of skill building. And unfortunately, I think there are programs that do that in hospital settings and other places. But if we're really trying to think about formation and that the person's own spirituality and their own depth is brought fully into play, and that you grow through experience, and it's sort of like setting a path that then they continue on with curiosity to learn more and to grow more, that's a better way of thinking about how we do education. But I will say when I've taught the intro to spiritual care class over like 30 years now, my first impulse is to think about first do no harm, and if I can help people to become non-dangerous, because there are things that people do because they have an image in their mind of what spiritual care is supposed to be that's actually quite domineering and quite harmful. If we can help people to get to a place of being more person-centered, then the path begins. and just attention to self and others in that ongoing intersubjectivity.
The intersubjectivity is another very rich field. We have subjectivity, and then we are in this interpersonal impact. And at the same time, I think, Pam, your very recent book essays have the self as a braided self, sort of this multitude of elements and aspects and experiences. Like, so individual is not just one. One individual can be many.
I get the multiplicity of self from my work in relational psychoanalysis, but I think it goes together with intersubjectivity, because if we're not one sort of solid thing relating to some other solid thing that's an object, but instead we're permeable and we're vulnerable to one another. And that's what my book Shared Wisdom was all about. We have other questions in the chat, I think.
Yes, so we have like the last question I would like to pick up. The question about online pastoral care, spiritual care, Seelsorge. Who wants to, like Shola, you want to?
Sure, it wasn't my question though, but the person had asked about how to be more present over online platforms in care. They were a chaplain in a they were working in a hospice setting, I think.
Being present online.
It seems to be that this is the major task of the moment. This is the major thing that is happening across the board and across disciplines. As a teacher and as a pastoral leader, this transition of worship styles and worship liturgies onto online, this translation of the whole pedagogical thing onto online, and especially teaching pastoral care online. I mean, this is the huge challenge of the moment, because it involves such a transposition of media. You know, when we talk about presence, which was lifted up again and again, what does it mean? How does it translate when this is the only means that is possible and not harmful?
My colleague Eileen Campbell-Reed, who teaches at Union and is also our online pedagogy consultant to the faculty.
She's on the line. She's here.
She's here. Yes, she's right here. And right. I mean, a lot of it has to do with all of her research in pastoral imagination, that there are benefits, like anything, it's a tool, right? And there are things that you lose, but there are other things that we're discovering that we gain. We've, like in these webinars, we've reached many, many more people than we would have with an in-person conference where people had to travel somewhere. It's more personal than we might have thought, but Eileen and I are both going into teaching the intro aspects of the intro course together tonight, and you know, keep us in your thoughts and prayers, because we're going to be doing small listening groups this way, and I've never done it before. I'm hoping that the people, because they've met each other and they care about each other already, will bring something to it that will make it more than mechanical. But it takes the intentionality of the participants.
Can I add something?
Yeah, Eileen, do you want to say something?
Please.
Quick, it was the question that I brought up in my group. Thank you for bringing up what you're saying now about the trade-offs. I was struck as I listened to all the presentations, something that was probably assumed, and that's very important for this online environment, which is to make space to actually tell our stories, right? That's how people get along in the world. It's how they think about their own lives. It's how they identify, they can answer 20 questions of a survey about their spirituality and never tell you the thing that's most in their heart right at the moment. So our ability to make space for people to show up and tell their stories, be present and relationally engaged, seems key to many of the things about, I'm most interested in this question of then how do we shift? What is the new paradigms? What are the new paradigms we want to embody and tell stories about and be in? And so many of the things that you all are bringing up just now in the question time, it comes back to narrative in many ways for me. And what I want to help my students learn how to do, listen to the story, understand what they're hearing, and offer some new ways of living their own story. So I'll stop with that, but thank you for this wonderful conversation today. It's been just great.
And actually, one emphasis I wanted to make about the story is this pandemic is dividing us, and maybe we may not be able to hear the last words before your loved one dies. And so then the stories of the deceased ones start to come in, and then we started to become intentional to ask the question about their deceased ones, and then let the deceased ones' stories integrate into this dialogue right now. And that was amazing also. So their spirit lives on.
Thank you. Deborah, you wanted to bring in something.
I just wanted to say that I was so surprised at how intimate a situation could be in this setup. But I think the biggest challenge is to limit all of your distractions. If you can really pay attention to somebody, you can be present with them. But if all kinds of noise and everything else is going on around you, you're just distracted. So if you could set yourself up in a way, you can be present just like you would in a room, I think. And the idea of letting people tell their stories about the deceased ones was really powerful to me after the Ferguson episode. In my area, my partner and I did a spiritual retreat for some of the mothers who've lost children. And it was so powerful to just sit down and let them talk about their loved one. And it meant the world to them, because people just don't get to hear about that person. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you. We have this interesting question in the chat about the pastoral authority. I think these are the words. The person who wrote it. Do you want to specify? In terms of pastoral authority, I wondered if we need to be more proactive in presenting our own specialty and expertise.
Could Star say a little bit more about the question? Is it possible to hear you say a little bit more about the question?
Well, in our discussion group, it seems like we are talking about the expertise of the social workers and doing the assessment. So I wonder if because even in our facility, the nurses have the power so I wonder how we can empower our pastoral authority in terms of
So a question about empowerment, if I understand it correctly.
Well, I think it maybe goes back to that Australian, the concentric ovals that the Australian pastoral care team that I had in my PowerPoint, that I think there are areas unique to our training and I'll use the word expertise, that we bring to the table but it's a team effort. And so, for example, if a Catholic person wants communion, I, as a Protestant Episcopal priest, will not do that. I will arrange for a Catholic priest to come and do that. And if someone from a different religion has a question about beliefs, I'm not going to try to answer that as someone who's an Episcopal priest, but I can facilitate the deepening of the questions, perhaps. And then there are people who have overarching responsibilities as chaplains in institutions to make sure that everyone is equally served. And then there's the wider team, which goes all the way back to our first week and some of what Christine Puchalski and others were saying about, through these whole 5 webinars, about how important it is that we all attend to the holistic person, including the spiritual dimension around meaning and purpose and suffering, but that we each also have a particular role to play. So I'm not going to try to address people's medical questions, and they're not going to try to address people's specific religious questions, but we can all attend to the spiritual questions.
Yes, and actually going back to the first webinar, I thought there was an interesting moment. The moment when Jessica Sitter said she thinks that she speaks to the converted. I don't know if you remember that, but I thought that was an interesting point when she said, you're also convinced that spiritual care is important for the community and for the treatment and whatever. So I actually wonder, maybe as a final question, what could be the contribution of theologians to further promote spiritual care?
I don't know if I speak as a theologian. It's more like a mystical point of view. I didn't share, but I did have my personal mystical experience when I lost consciousness in emergency room. And I only one time in my life so far, I felt another living human's presence, incredibly healing and comforting. And it was not cognitive or conceptual realization. It was, I felt in the deepest place in my whole being that another living human's presence. He didn't tell me any comforting words, or he didn't do anything. He was just looking at the monitor attached to my heart, but only that moment. So I bring that. So even when a caregiving family member is feeling guilty, maybe I should have done this, and maybe I'm not doing enough, all those unclear, struggling moments. Just when you, and if you have anything, you have conviction about a certain spiritual sense, then when you bring it, it really matters how you bring it. If you are so grounded, and then not to enforce your theology or anything, but then from your experience as another vulnerable human being, but in the vulnerability, you have a certain experience and you present it with conviction and grounded presence. I think that's one way, one concrete example. For instance, I would tell this family who is not sure about if their loved one will blame after he dies or something. Then I might say like, look, like your heart is in the right direction. You've been doing your best. And then he may be unconscious, but I have no doubt he knows, like he's feeling that. And because of that, he can have peace and strength. And your daily struggle is the source of his peace and strength. And I can say that out of my conviction, not to force upon anything, but family always see it as a pastoral authority in that moment. And it takes great comfort. Yeah.
And I want to give Emmanuel the last word on this, but you know, not all of us are fortunate to have mystical experiences, and you don't have to have a mystical experience to have a spiritual part of your being. But I mean, I've had my own experiences certainly, but I think as a theologian, and this goes back to some of what Emmanuel was saying earlier too, I think we have a responsibility not just to pass on dogma and doctrine and even to interpret existing dogma and doctrine, and that's the end of the theologian's role. And I think chaplaincy of all of the related ministry professions may have pushed us the most in an interreligious direction, because our patients and our clients and the people we serve aren't all Christian, and they aren't all in one religion. And so I think the role of a theologian is to challenge existing theologies and, you know, the Anglican tripod of scripture, tradition, and reason, but that reason has to be brought to bear on the interpretation of both scripture and tradition. And I would hope theology is always trying to open new doors in a liberative way.
And that to me is the if you like, the pastoral authority, or the theologians thing, is this critical edge that I wrote a chapter in Handbook of Spirituality and Health. I think it's the title, edited by Christine Pruchalski. And I titled my piece, it was for chaplains, I titled my piece, Blessed Irritant for Wholeness. That's the role of the theologian, that you know, that you are sensitive to who is missing, whose voice is not being heard, whose suffering is not on the table, what dimensions, you know. So your presence there is a critical presence that is going to critique the language and the practices that suppress, that oppress, that destroy, and are actually promoting diversity, promoting polyvocality, as we've been saying, you know, and lifting lifting every voice, you know, and enabling the hearing of those who are not accounted for, or those whose experience doesn't mean anything for maybe the medical people or the social workers, as well as the theologians.
Thank you so much. What a great last word. Thank you so much. I think we have to wrap up our discussion at this point. I hope we can have the chat again, or those people who want it. Pam, is it possible? Okay, so email Pam if you want to have a record of the chat, because there's so much more in it. Thank you so much for being with us today and over the last few weeks. Thank you so much to our panelists today. This has actually been our final session of our second webinar series on the basic question, what is spiritual care? From the perspectives of our religious traditions, from the perspectives of our different professions.
And please do join our organization, the International Association for Spiritual Care. If you have found these webinars enriching to you, we hope to continue to do both in-person conferences and more of these webinars, as well as hopefully publications when the publishing world gets back on its feet post-COVID, and we would love to have you join. We will be having a membership meeting this summer to elect new officers and to chart the course for the next couple of years. So just Google International Association for Spiritual Care and you will find us. And I will put today's chat in the comment under the video of today's webinar on our Facebook page. Thank you.
So we say bye, and thank you so much for being with us.
Hope to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mm-hmm.
I'll miss you.